Okay, so we're getting back to if we can get back to the question I asked about how people are being surveilled from these fusion centers. Are they? Could you tell me about that part? How people are selected and what kinds of things happen in terms of surveillance?
Just like I was telling you earlier, I got off track on something else, but if that local policeman in El Paso tells his intelligence people at El Paso, they think you're a sovereign citizen, they think you're some kind of radical, you're some problem. You're not an ordinary person. There's something really different about you, and you could harm a lot of people, or you could cause an uprising. Well, that goes to the Fusion Center. The Fusion Center does the assessment. If they think there's not a problem, they leave it alone. But if it requires some investigation, then they'll put some agents to surveil your phone calls, check your emails. They will ping your phone constantly to find out where your phone's at. I got a friend that he's got a black box that he keeps in his trunk. He puts his smartphone in there when he leaves the place and then gets it out somewhere else because he don't know nobody tracking. So, but he's addicted to a phone. But they basically they may be in trees, they may be hiding under cars. They got these little solar cameras that will charge all day and film all night, or it'll charge and go for days and days and days. That they'll work on an encrypted Wi-Fi that will go back to their office.
Could we tell if they're pinging our phones? Would there be something to indicate that?
No.
Oh.
I mean, if you got some mad scientist skills, I'm sure you could do something. But 99% of the public don't know, and it's something that the phone company has to do. And the phone companies are not supposed to be doing this without warrants. But there's nothing that prohibits them from doing it. So what happens is, if me and we own AT&T hypothetically, and we're the CEO and president, and they come in and say, hey, we're the FBI, and here we're with DEA, and we got things that we're going to need to be getting from y'all on a regular basis. Local police are going to need to get. Are y'all going to cooperate with us, or do you think we're going to have a problem with you? Well, you probably don't want to wind up getting accidentally sent to prison for the rest of your life, or me neither. So we decide we're going to cooperate with them. And so we're going to give them our customers' information, okay, which shouldn't happen, but it does. So all the big carriers work with them to supermajority of the time. In other words, if I called a phone company and I said, hey, I'm conducting an investigation on Derek, this is his location, but this is something to do with my jurisdiction. I'm doing an investigation, and I need his phone pinged to see where he is now. And I want you to ping it every 30 minutes and tell me where he's at. They'll do that for me. And that's no questions asked. They just do it. I mean, I just verify my ORI number. It's called an origination number that's assigned to you by the FBI and in your state. And I give them that number. And then they look me up on their database and find out I'm good. Then they see what phone number I'm calling from. So if it goes back to my cell phone, which is registered as a law enforcement phone, then they'll say, okay. If I call from the office phone, then it's registered as a government phone. Either way, they'll tell me what I want to know. And I say, and then say I'm driving across country because I want to come surveil you for something. Then I'll tell them, okay, now turn his phone on and give me the code. So they'll turn your phone on where I can listen to what you're saying.
Okay, now do you literally, for instance, if my phone was off, they could turn it back on or something like that?
Yes, absolutely.
I have seen that happen. I have, on a few occasions, seen that happen.
Right, but there's two ways we could do it. We can make it where you see the phone come on to startle you and to rattle you, right? Or we can do it covertly, which means the phone comes on, but as far as you're concerned, no lights come on. It seems to be turned off. And you think it's off, but it's not. It's listening. It's an eavesdropping device that you brought into your own home, your own bedroom, and we're going to listen to what you say.
Okay, so for those people that feel that they are being listened to and they hire all these private investigators to come and bug sweep their house, a lot of those people are wasting their money then.
Well, these are government agents that do the surveillance. They're not private investigators out of the private sector. These are government law enforcement agents. But I'm saying,
right.
But the more they find out about you, that makes them think you're crazy, you're bad, you're a threat. At some point, they decide you're too much of a threat, but they do an analysis. The analysis tells them it's almost like a cookbook. It's almost like a recipe. If it's this, this, and this, do this. If it's this, do that. And then there's some gray areas. But basically, they got like 5 different categories. And so if you reach number 5, they could smoke you, which is a word for take you out, kill you, assassinate you, or send you to a FEMA camp or a mind-altering underground facility and try and change your mind, inject you with certain vaccines or things where then when you're released, you don't actually even remember being there. And it seems kind of hazy, like a foggy dream. And when you get back to your life, you can't think quite no more, and so all of your fight is gone from you.
Okay, some people have missing time, Chief Daymond. Some people have missing time, whereas they feel that they have been abducted, taken to places unknown, and maybe did some things that they have no recall doing, and that they were being utilized for something perhaps heinous.
Well, here's what I can tell you. Not all cases, okay? I can't tell you for everything, but I can tell you the vast majority of these things either happen out in the desert or they happen in the national forest. In the desert, it's very sparsely populated, and people can camouflage themselves, and they can come out and get you and do all the things they need to. And they do it under the cover of darkness with night vision, another thing. In the woods, it's so thick and so much is around there, you can't see somebody and they come out and get you and take you away. So people that go missing in the national forest, state forest, or go missing in the desert, that's where a lot of them go missing. And then they say, I can't account for my time. I was here, and then I was nowhere. But people never go missing in a crowd. People don't go missing in the middle of Walmart. And they don't usually go missing in Walmart parking lot because Walmart is set up with FEMA, and they audio record 24/7, 365, and anytime that anybody wants those Walmart videos, they pull up anywhere. So that's a heavy surveillance area. And sometimes the left hand don't know what the right hand's doing. And agents have crossed each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what about people that are in the public that surveil people that follow them around, say like in stores, just to keep an eye on this individual? Are there groups that do that type of thing that you know?
Yeah, I mean, in other words, just say I was a fusion center operative agent, and I was giving you as an assignment, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to try and find, depending on if there's a lot of houses around where you are, businesses, I'm going to be discreet. I'm going to hide me in my vehicle somewhere. I'm going to maybe be a guy riding a bicycle to come by your house. I may be jogging or walking around. I may even be out there in a wheelchair or cane, so I don't really just, you don't really suspect me. If I can park my car and work out of my car or van or SUV, then I'll do it. they even have what they call heater packs, and a heater pack is something that goes up under the vehicle so that when you're working in it for long periods of time, it's actually causing your air conditioning or your heater to work, but your engine isn't running. Because if people saw fumes coming out of your tailpipe or heard your thing running for hours, they'd say, "What's going on over there?" So they got a lot of elaborate setups to make vehicles appear that they're not running, nobody's in them. But I would do that. Then if you went to walk, you got on a bicycle, you got in the car, on a bus to go to town, then I tell you. I go to wherever you go. I see who you talk to. I use bionic ears to try and listen to what you're saying. I try and figure out, how many people do you talk to? Where do you go and talk to people? What are you asking them? What are you telling them? Because I'm doing an assessment on you, right? And if we say, well, he's a pocket of trouble, meaning in his local area he's trouble, but he's nothing significant, but he's still telling lots of things we don't want him saying. Then I can say, we got to hook him up. Okay? I don't believe in other stuff, but other people do it. I just know that they do it. I don't participate, never have, and I will never do it. But if I say, well, we're going to hook him up, if I talk like they did, that's what I'm saying, then it's okay. Well, let's get him at a 0.002 frequency, and so they're using a cell tower or they're using a radio tower or something, and they send it or a satellite beam to your house, and so it disrupts the electrical circuits in your house. So your lights might blink on and off. It might cause a certain sound that nobody can hear in the house, but you can hear it. And so it hums or makes strange noises in your head. Or it makes you violently sick, because it's like a certain type of microwave or a nauseating frequency. It's like what they call frequency.
I'm sorry. I want to point out to you that does happen a lot in our community, where people are very ill from frequencies that are in their home environment.
Right. Now, I know one man in Oklahoma. He's the only one I know, but he actually has a Faraday cage around his entire home. I mean, his whole house is inside of one. Mm-hmm. He lives way out in the middle of the sticks, but he did some special operations in Dallas, and he upset a lot of people. And he started talking about this, that, and the other. And people telling him he was crazy. He was a lunatic. He didn't understand. He's crazy. So he talked to some guys that were radio engineers in the city of Dallas. This is back in the very late 70s, early 80s. And he said, something seems wrong. He said, it's almost like, I've been sick at work, I've been sick at home, and even when I go to my cabin, I'm sick. So they says, well, what is it? So they said, sounds almost like you got radio frequency sickness, like you're bombarded by too many radio waves or certain frequencies. And he says, what's that? So they told him, and so he actually dug under his house and around his house and did all kind of things to make a Faraday cage around his whole cabin. And, he told me, he said, once that was done and I went to bed, he said, I slept for the first time in years like a baby. And so then somebody come out from the sheriff's office one day and said, hey, you don't have permits to have all this stuff. So they was going to try and dismantle it so he could continue being attacked. And he said, there aren't no building permits out here in the county. He said, I own this land, own this home, scot-free. He said, there ain't nothing you can do. So he went 2 or 3 rounds with them, Anyway, the point is, to the best of my knowledge, he's still there. I haven't talked to him recently, but, he's there for years and years and years. And so he said when he went to go fishing, he had one of those kind of like a blanket thing that he'd put around him, like almost like a shawl, and he wore some kind of looked like a baseball cap. And he said, but there's different things in this baseball cap that these guys tell me, and said it helps me not be sick or whatever. He said, so when I'm out, I do this stuff. He says, it's protection. Well, I didn't, at that particular time in my life, I didn't know that he wasn't crazy.
Oh, okay.
In other words, in my mind, I said, he might be nuts, but there might be something. And I kept thinking an anomaly in the earth or the magnetic field or where he happened to be, or that he was a hypochondriac, thinking he was sick all the time. But I said, this man's very honest. He's very stable. And I knew his family for years. And I said, he's always been a good man, and he's always done right. I said, something seriously is wrong with his mind, or there's some kind of knowledge that somebody locally or in the government's doing something to mess him up. So, some people go to extremes. Now, after I talked to you last night, I did 4 hours of research on TIs.
Oh,
today I did another 2 hours. Then I called a few friends of mine, and then I actually went and met some people in person today and said, tell me about this. Is this real? Is this not real? Is it a little real? And so one of the people I talked to said, probably the lion's majority is true and correct. There are maybe 10 or 15% of the people that think that they're being targeted, and they're not. Maybe even 20% think they are and they're not. In other words, they have delusional problems. They have a chemical imbalance in their mind or their body, some neurological issues going on with them, and if the right people spent time with them and studied them and their environment, they might find out that their home is over a heavily leaded area, and the lead is causing problems in their body. Nothing malicious, it's just where they're at. Or that they're in a cross between high-wire lines in a certain place and radio towers over there, and it just happens to be geographically where they're located. He says, so that does happen. He says some people believe they're targeted, they're not. But probably the majority are. And he says, so you don't just have one source of targeting. He said, you may have DOD that it's got some of these people going this way. You got CIA that's doing some people over here. Then you got some political people that call people in government at certain places and say, hey, this guy's on my tail end, or this woman, or they're causing a lot of havoc, and we need to shut them down. And so they're electronically harassed. They're targeted for malicious action because of something that they're saying or they're doing, or their family members doing, and they get to the other family member through you. So say you could have an uncle or cousin that you're very close with, everybody knows that, and this man or woman's got nerves of steel, and they can't do nothing to them. They either have to kill them or leave them alone. There ain't nothing in between. So they target a close relative or a very best friend or a husband or wife, boyfriend or girlfriend to get to you. It's a psychological targeting for something along those lines. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
It's just one of those kind of situations.
Okay, well that does happen. It does happen quite often. Chief Daymond, that family members are also targeted, and it's a psychological tactic.
You have to give me just a second. I'm going to have to change phone systems because my battery's fixing to go. Hang on just a moment.
Okay. Okay, if you're just joining us, we are talking tonight with Pastor Daymond Jones, who is a former chief of police, and he has a wealth of knowledge. Well, I've asked you a lot of questions about methods and tactics and so forth, and basically it was for sort of validation of these are some of the things that we as a community are experiencing, which you have validated by, some of the stories that you're sharing with us. So, a lot of things that you have mentioned, the directed energy weapons, the home surveillance, the in-home surveillance, the satellite surveillance, all of that is validation of things that are happening in our community. The chemical attacks even are some things that are happening in our community. The in-community surveillance and following around and that type of thing happens quite often in our community. It happens with me a lot, and a lot of the community harassment and following, I've kind of learned to ignore a lot of that. But for some people, it's an issue for them.
Right.
So we're kind of learning how to cope with certain situations.
Now, one of my resources today told me, he says, now, Chief, you need to keep in mind that there's two different types of targeting. I said, okay. He says, one of them, you were very super familiar with being in law enforcement. He said, you have somebody that's a suspect, as in a rape suspect. You have a homicide case, and you're trying to close in on the killer or killers. He said, we always referred to them as targeted individuals for purposes of investigations of crimes. He said, so there's that type, which is completely above board, out in the open, and that happens all the time. He says, now some of the people will say they're being harassed by the government, said, but we're just doing our job and we're actually trying to protect society from harm. Said, but then there's the malicious things that government agencies do to shut people up or to dissuade them from their research or whistleblowing or other things like that. And said, so there's they said that we call it a cookbook. And I said, well, what does that mean? He says, well, it's basically just a lot of recipes, and it just gets into, at the Fusion Center, it said it doesn't have to necessarily go through the Fusion Center. Certain people make phone calls, and it just goes directly to the people in charge of surveillance and harassment. And said that they do what they're told to do, like little robots. He said they don't question things morally, ethically, or legally. They just do what they're told. But other things do go through the Fusion Center, as in if they find out that you're a bad guy or a bad group or you pose a threat, then they say we got to dissuade them from doing these things. So if we go up out in the open and go to their house and tell them, hey, don't do this no more, it's going to be bad for you, said some people will be quiet. But other people will run to the newspaper and TV and make a big deal out of it, and then they're in the spotlight, and we try and leave everybody in the spotlight alone because it's liable to trace back to us. So he says some of the biggest whistleblowers, they keep going on TV shows and radios for their own safety. And said they're not stupid. There was a guy that just a while back, he just released a book, and he used to do a lot of this stuff. I can't think of his name right this minute. I talked to him here recently, and I can't even think of his name. But sometimes you can see the stars in the sky, but you just can't connect this star to that star. You know, what do they have in common, or what's the big picture? It's like a big puzzle. You got the four corners, and you got some of it, but you still can't see the picture clearly. And so I've become 10 times more aware in the last half a dozen years of things I've seen all my life, and I said, how does this connect together? And I've been finding these things that connect together, and I'm always coming up with new things, but sometimes it's through your water system, sometimes it's through the air system, sometimes it's electronic surveillance, electronic harassment, reverse systems, like if you're on a computer and you think your laptop camera's off and it appears to be off, but it's still listening and watching you. And so some people that I know that know this stuff, they said, we know what their capabilities are, and they'll have a room, a single room in their entire house, and that's where their phones stay, that's where their TVs stay, that's where their video games and computers stay, and it's walled off for the rest of the entire house, so that they can't listen to them. And this guy told me, he said, you know that song called Moonlight Feels Right? Come out in 1975. I said, yeah. He said, there's something in those particular music and that particular song that people in the no zone like to play in their house and put it on a loop if they're talking to somebody privately in their home. I said, you got to be crapping me. He said, no. He said, there's certain frequencies in that song. He said, it's not the only one. He said, there's a couple things in some Beatles music too, but he said that he knew that song specifically, that something about radio frequencies and stuff can't interact with it, or they can't listen in, they can't mug you with it. And so when he told me that, I know that song. I've listened to it 100 times, but I went back and listened to it again. He said, and I talked to him again. I said, is there something in the lyrics? He said, no, it ain't got nothing to do with the lyrics. It's got to do with the music, the instrumentation, the frequency, blah, blah, blah. He said, there's certain other songs like that. And he said they wasn't made for that purpose, to his knowledge, but he said it's just something we learned.
Wow. There's actually some on YouTube. There are people that make these videos on YouTube that basically are geared and designed to obstruct the signals that come into our homes and things like that, and sometimes they're effective. So
yes.
So it's interesting that that there is music that does similar things. I guess I'm going to have to kind of wrap up so that we can get the callers in. I did want to emphasize one thing. You touched on it lightly. I think we should make mention of this. It's a very important point. You're speaking of the target individuals and how law enforcement and military use that term. They've used it for years. And they use it in a different sense than we do. So when we approach an officer and say, are you aware of targeted individuals, we might interpret that term one way, but the officer might interpret it in a different way. So we kind of
correct.
So we as a community need to be aware of this term that is also used by the military and police in reference to a different type of situation where they are targeting a specific individual. It might be a homicide case or whatever, but they are targeting an individual, and they call that person a targeted individual.
That is absolutely correct, and that term was used by the FBI most predominantly through the 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, it's still used to this day, but I'm saying that they're the ones that come up with that term, to the best of my knowledge.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. They did.
And so here's the thing. Local law enforcement, back until the 90s, had a very, very, very strong hand in the law. But in the very late 80s and early 90s, especially with Bill Clinton, they started trying to write federal titles and codes, and they started trying to make the federal law enforcement extremely, extremely powerful. And although the city police to the state police had a reasonable strength, the federal government had 10 times to 100 times fold the power and strength. And they basically said, what we say goes. And, we're so powerful. So the little state police and county city police, they looked up to these federal agents like, boy, you're polished and you're shined and you're something special, And in actuality, the sheriff in the county has 10 times the power of anybody else, because the sheriff is in the Constitution for the state, and he's the chief peace officer. And federal agents can't even enter into the city if the sheriff says you can't come in here. They can't go in there. They can't serve warrants. They can't do nothing. And in certain places in the country, certain groups, the people that live within a certain county, they'll make sure that somebody gets elected as sheriff, and they'll keep them in, because they'll tell the FBI and DEA, you ain't coming in here running those sting operations. You're not coming in here serving warrants. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. And they'd hold the line. And when they come up with the Brady Act, you had two sheriffs. I think one's in Utah and somewhere else. But anyway, they filed stopping the Brady Act from taking effect, as in Jim Brady, when he got shot with Ronald Reagan.
Oh, yeah.
When Hinckley tried to assassinate him, they come up with this Brady Act. Well, they were telling police departments and sheriff departments they had to do this, this, and this. And they says, first of all, you don't pay my salary. Number two, you ain't got nothing to do with local elections in our state law, and you can't mandate that we do these things, because we see it as totally unconstitutional under our state constitution, and it's definitely unconstitutional under the national constitution. And they fought, and they won it. And they kept trying to tell people, you just don't understand how powerful the sheriff is. But so many sheriffs have got sucked into Homeland Security or industrial military complexes promised them things. And so it's greed and playing with the big boys that a lot of them have disarmed themselves, metaphorically speaking. And so they don't do what they're supposed to do. In other words, let me just tell you this one quick thing. A sheriff, if a man comes to foreclose your house, okay, if the man doesn't have the wet ink signatures, the original contract in his hand, and say, I'm foreclosing on this default, and he has court papers that has adjudicated that it's correct, That's the only way that man can come take possession of your house. If you don't, the sheriff is supposed to stand on the curtilage of your land and tell him if he steps on your land, he's going to put him in jail. He cannot foreclose on your house. He hasn't followed due process of law, and the sheriff is to lock him up. So sheriff has so much power, you just can't believe how much power sheriff has. And so go ahead and I'll be quiet.
Okay. Well, so you're saying that if we were somehow to get a sheriff on our side, we would have a formidable ally.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that's interesting to know. Okay.
Yeah, some sheriffs will not allow a fusion center to be in their county.
Mm-hmm.
They won't allow it.
Okay.
And they start trying to get federal task force inside the county, and they'll say, no, and they'll tell them they'll arrest them if they do. You know?
Okay. Well, it's probably about, it's close to 10 o'clock your time. I did want you, if you have the energy,
I do.
Okay, because the callers are kind of chomping at the bit to speak with you. I'm sure they have thousands of questions. So, okay,
I'll answer what I can.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and we're going to go to the callers at this time. Guys, you've been listening to Chief Daymond Jones, a retired chief of police in Alabama. He has amazing stories to tell and all kinds of experience and knowledge in reference to what we are experiencing. So if you have questions for him at this time, feel free to star 6 on your phone as we continue our discussion. And we have a number of people lined up already with questions. So here we go. Hi, is that Roseanne?
Yeah, hi, Derek. Hello. Thank you to your guest for doing what he's doing. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say there is a group called the Constitutional Sheriffs, and they swear by the Constitution, and we should be looking them up and seeing where they are. There is that group. I wanted to ask, you were talking about the phones and how, they can be turned on. Do you know if they can be turned on if you are in airplane mode?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay. Okay, when you were talking, that's what I wanted to know. So you got to take the battery out. Right.
But that's what I was fixing to tell you is that I don't know about all phones, but certain phones have a hidden internal minor battery. And when I say a minor battery, it might function for 30 minutes. It might function for 4 hours. I don't know. But it's a smaller internal battery, and the CIA created something called an energy bar. At least that's what I refer to it as. I think that's what they call it. But it's some kind of metal that's inside the phone that is always keeping itself topped off with some energy. So if you take the battery out, they can still actually listen and do things until that battery gets away. It's like a backup battery, so to speak. And I don't know that all phones have them, but certain ones have had them.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so you have to wrap the phone in tin foil and put it in a metal box with the battery. Put it in another. Okay, that's very useful.
Okay, thank you.
One more. Can I have one more question?
Go ahead.
Yeah. During that conversation about the phones, you said that when they turn the phone on, they can let you see it to startle you. Okay.
Right.
Which is a form of harassment.
Right.
Are you saying that harassment is like widespread tactic in law enforcement, or are you referring to our intelligence agencies?
Well, I think there's lots of different harassment, as in you could have a local bully police department that decides they're going to harass somebody because they think you're a dope dealer or they think you're a pedophile and they don't really know, but they think this, or you've been reporting wrongdoing that cops have been doing. You could set them off for any reason, and they could harass you in lots of different ways, and then say, well, we're just patrolling like we have to. But there have been police that have actually cut people's water off to their house, turned off electric to their house because they had means and friends and abilities to do that. And so people look around, everybody's lights on but them. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's very scary.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is common practice, would you say, or is this unusual?
I say that there are isolated people in isolated situations. I think an estimate that I was given today says that the number of people that could be being targeted individuals, TIs, the way you talk about it, the way you're using it, could be as high as 50,000 people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But, it can be as low as a few thousand to 50,000.
Okay.
And it's not just here, it's around the world.
Right, exactly.
That's right. Thank you so much. Okay,
Yes,
Derek,
ma'am.
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your question, Roseanne. In regards to that, Chief Daymond, do you feel that federal agencies have approached you about targeting certain individuals that they feel need to be watched for some reason? Has that happened with you?
I would have to say yes. For the most part, I say no to some degree. It's not crystal clear. What I'm saying is that I've had, for example, certain alphabet agencies, an agent, or some agents come to see me at my office, and they said, do you know this man or woman? Yes. What do you know about them? And, of course, they're taking notes. And they'll say, well, we have good and sufficient reason to believe they're involved in illegal covert operations of smuggling guns or doing dope or whatever. Now, see, that could have been true, or it could have been a cover story, But they're saying, we would like you and your people to keep an eye on them, an extra close eye. So they're basically asking us to patrol up and down their street a lot. Anything we see unusual, get the license tag numbers off of cars, videotape them, maybe occasionally just sit on the street and see what happens, because we're not noticeable. We're just your local police, so we're not so noticeable. We know most of the people in the area.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you've seen an unmarked car, you've seen an unknown van sitting there for, many, many hours or something, it might draw suspicion, but we wouldn't. So they might come through.
Okay. Absolutely.
So I've been asked by a lot of police from across the country, but it might be a sheriff, captain or lieutenant or a detective 10 states over saying, hey, we've been working this case on this here, and they're really with that department, but they might be hooked up with a CIA unit over there for some reason. I just don't know. So they asked me, so I'm saying, probably out of all the times I've been asked, I'm sure there have been a few that probably were TIs on a national level dealing with DOD, military, high-end law enforcement agencies, targeting people for investigations and or possible harassment.
Right. Okay. So this is something I'm so glad to hear you say that because it confirms a lot of our experience. There are many, many in this community that feel that they are targeted by the local police. However, what it could be is that the local police are following orders, are following what's being handed down to them from the Fed.
Right.
Okay, I'm glad that you clarified that. Okay, we have a caller on the line. Do you have a question or a comment for Chief Daymond?
Yes, I do actually. My question is, many of us, I believe, have been put into this system by people who want to ruin our lives. They create slander which are not true, etc., etc. Is there any place where we can go to clear our record so that we get out of this system?
Well, because things are covert, then they're outside of the normal realm and the normal working of government. So I'm saying that, yes, I'm not an attorney, and I can't give legal advice. I can just tell you what I think or what I believe and why. You would, if you had a belief that you was in a national government database, and that you was being targeted and people had said things about you that weren't true, and they were malicious, and you could get a federal judge to listen to you. You could get a federal judge to believe what you're saying is true by preponderance of your evidence, and you had something that you could take to them. In other words, you can't say, hey, I think this and I think that and I believe this. Well, they got to have some proof. In other words, hypothetically, say you had been chemically attacked at your residence, and you had meters around your house that gathered up all this information, okay? And you had chemists and engineers that could say, we checked for a mile either way at their house and everything's normal. Their house is the only thing. And we've seen certain trucks and things driving by or aircraft flying overhead or drones, and so somebody's doing this. And, you know, this ties back to CIA operations. And so a federal judge could, you know, give an order, but you'd have to know who was doing it for him to give a federal order to him to stop it or to an order to remove you from government systems. So it's possible, but not real likely. You'd have to have a very smart, intelligent attorney that was aware of, he'd have to become educated. It'd take somebody like Derek or me to sit down with an attorney over 2 or 3 or 4 days, hand them research, school them, teach them, and they'd have to have a desire and a drive, and they'd have to have accountants, civil engineers, scientists, people that study radio frequencies and how they can hurt you, that understand energy weapons and all these other things. So, you know, it would be a brain trust. It almost would be like an attorney or even a few attorneys and all these individuals around a big meeting table talking for hours and hours, and then they have to start doing their research and prepare cases. And so it's possible, but it would probably take, you know, a few hundred people to pull all their money and resources together to hire the right team to do it.
So we're being tortured in this slow kill program and the surveillance and everything else until the day we die. We will never get out of this. They will never stop doing this torture that they're doing to me, for instance. I have to live with this until I die or until I commit suicide. Is that what it is?
Well, I don't want to sound gloomy. I don't know. I've been told that some people are targeted for a specific amount of time. Like, say you get a shot across the bow, as they say, meaning here's your warning. We've made you sick several times. You should be able to figure this out. You need to be quiet, leave things alone, or you need to quit associating with certain people. or publishing articles on the internet or whatever it is you're doing to set them off. So part of it is figuring out what are you doing or what have you been doing or who are you close to that's doing stuff that calls them to act out, calls them to act against you, that puts you in as a targeted individual. You got to find out who wants to do this to me, why would they want to do it, and then you can isolate it. And then you can start doing some research and probable likelihoods. And if it's something, this guy to me today says, he said, there's been people targeted for 30 days or 90 days. So there's been people that's not targeted till
for years.
Yeah. So he said, because the way he put it, they don't learn, they don't mature, they don't grow up, they don't realize that this is a fight or a war that they can't win, and they have to yield and capitulate, and we'll turn it off.
Okay.
Well,
thanks. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for your question, Nancy. We have a lot of people to get to. We do have to keep moving here. Hi, Barbara. Welcome to the call. Do you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I do. Is there any way that we can find out if we are on the terrorist list or no travel list? And if so, we start calling different agency offices. Is it going to put us in a position of being red flagged where we weren't before? Or is there some way we can find out?
That's an excellent, very excellent question. And I'll tell you this. My daddy told me this, my grandpa told me this, and others men have told me this. They said, listen, when you go to somebody for help, don't let that be the first time you ever talk to them. Because if you show up cold knocking on somebody's door saying, I need help, they're going to be, well, I don't know you from nothing. We don't have a relationship, and you're asking for a favor. So here's what I'm going to say. Your congressman, but more specifically, your senator, your 2 federal senators from your state, they can find out anything, practically. Mm-hmm. There are some things that they can find out that they will not tell you, but a question like that is under the Freedom of Information Act, but they can access it really quickly. So, hypothetically, if you found out what your local senator's office was, and say you got to knowing 1 or 2 of the aides in there, and you were talking about other unrelated issues, maybe you're talking about something in the environment, you're talking about a voting rights bill or different things, and, how does the senator feel about this and this, and what can I help the senator do in regard to this or that? So they see you as a friend, they see you as an ally, and, within several weeks or a month or 2, then I think that you're in a position not to stick out, and you're a good constituent and they like you. So they basically just say, they call TSA and say the senator has a request. And they'll say, what's the request? And you have to sign a form that says you authorize them to research or to contact other government agencies on your behalf. It's just a signature and a date. There's nothing to it. I've done them before myself when I needed something checked out. So then they'll contact the TSA, and they'll give them an answer, usually on the phone immediately, but they'll also send them something in writing. Yes, this person is on this list, or no, they're not. And it's as simple as that, and it don't trigger nothing. But if you come into the senator's office cold cocked and say, hey, I want to know if I'm on this list, they're going to say, well, who are you? Why would you think you're on that list? And so you create a lot of suspicion. and then TSA. So when they call TSA, and you're not going to be around when they do, they're going to say, this person acts kind of weird and strange, and I don't know them. We've never seen them, never heard from them, and they want to know if they're on this list. Are they on this list? If they're not, do you think maybe we should put them on the list? You see what I'm saying? It's a whole different mindset.
Yes, right.